Welcome to Elisha's Space, where faith and mental health intersect. Join Dr. Rhonda Simmons as we explore the transformative power of forgiveness and forward movement. Dive deep into healing, resilience, and spiritual growth. Let's embark on this journey together.
Thank you, audience, for joining us on Elisha Space. I am so excited to have Dr. Rhonda Simmons with us today. She is not one to be taken lightly. She is also a pastor, and she is the founder of a nonprofit. And this nonprofit is a very special one because the purpose of it is around the topic of empowerment. Within that topic of empowerment, it is to breathe life into others and to help people see themselves in a manner in which is positive, inspiring, and to help you be your best self. The name of this organization is the Simmons Empowerment Foundation. And let me also add, with all of those things that I just said, she's also a master certified professional coach. So, when I found out about her, I said, she need to come on my show because she is just, as we used to say in the 80s and the 90s, she is all that and a bag of chips. So, Dr. Simmons, I want to take a moment to just thank you for for joining us today. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us on Elisha Space. How are you doing today?
I am wonderful. Thank you as well, Elisha, for just having me on the show. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited and I'm glad I didn't miss this opportunity. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, I'm just going to go right in with this. Could you share with us a bit about your journey and the pivotal moment that led you to advocate for women's empowerment? What brought you to this place?
Well, a couple of things, two things in particular. First, God gave me a vision for this foundation in 2003, right before I moved to Texas. And a whole lot of life happened between 2003 and when I actually started the foundation in 2020. But I started it right on time, right in the middle of the pandemic. God spoke to me that it was time. And the second thing is with empowerment, I've always been surrounded by very strong women who have just made lasting impacts on my life and on my ministry. And so, specifically within empowerment, my foundation supports unwed teen moms. And the reason why I have that particular niche is because that's what God told me to do. He told me to start a home for unwed teen moms, and I had no idea that he was going to tell me to do that. I just knew I was moving to Texas and didn't know anyone except for Jesus and my husband. And so that's what he told me to do. And so that's what I've been working towards for the last 4 years.
That is amazing. And it is so, I feel like homes for unwed teen moms is kind of dwindling and it's so needed. I think it's great that you're doing that within that niche because so many people are wanting and needing that support, and there seems to be lessening, unfortunately.
Yes. And our home is not just going to be a place for them to live or, a shelter type atmosphere, but we are going to empower those young ladies through pre and postnatal health education, job skills training, and coaching.
That sounds fantastic. So, pretty much what you're doing is you're setting them up for success.
Absolutely. That's the goal.
Let me ask you, what does it mean for a young woman to reclaim her personal power? In your view, what does that look like?
There is a pivotal point in a young lady's life where, in order to move forward, you have to get closure with the past. And you and I both know that there could be 101 reasons why a teen mom is a teen mom. It's not as cut and dry, black and white as some people may think. Like they lived a promiscuous life. It's many times it's not that simple. They could be carrying their uncle's child, their father's child, their brother's child. Things. Life is not always very pretty, and so in order to move forward, they have to gain that closure and be able to rectify the past in order to move forward, because so many times it is so hard, like the Bible says, no man can put their hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom. It's hard to go forward and backward at the same time. It's impossible. And so you have to come to that point of decision. Do I really want to go forward or not? And if I do, then I'm going to have to let go of the past and not be held captive to the condemnation or the judgment of others. I just have to move forward.
Wow. You just said a whole lot. So, what I, on my tingly therapy side, counselor side, was picking up from that was a key aspect to getting yourself back, your empowerment back. It's moving in a space of forgiveness.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I'll tell you what I have thought about forgiveness, because it can be a process. Because keeping it real, a teen mom, a lot of times it's because of a trauma.
Right.
They're dealing with this from a place of trauma.
Hmm.
Or there was a trauma that occurred that caused this to occur. So, in some space or place, there was a trauma. And part of the healing process, especially if an offense has been done to you, is moving in a space of forgiveness. So I've come to a understanding that forgiveness is not just, oh, I forgive you, let's keep moving on. Sometimes you can move in a space of forgiveness, but not give that other person access to you, because you have to do what's healthy for you. Now, just work with me. So, around that space of forgiveness, what I have come to understand about forgiveness, and believe me, I am still studying this concept because I think it can be unlayered in so many different ways. My understanding of forgiveness is no longer being offended, shifted, or moved by the offense that someone else has done to you. And sometimes that definition of a forgiveness is something that you have to do for yourself too. Because if you're a teen mom and you're like, how did I get here? Those kinds of things, that forgiving of yourself type of thing. I'm getting there, audience. What I'm hearing you say is that in order to reclaim your personal power, you have to flow from a space of forgiveness in order to go forward. Because you can't go forward and still hold a grudge, because I think it's always going to be there. It's like the devil on your shoulder. It's always going to be
Absolutely.
there. So, in order to go forward, in order to get your empowerment back, you have to move from a space of forgiveness. Is that what I just heard you say? That is not an easy thing for a lot of people.
No, it's not. A lot of times when I tell people about my foundation and who we support, I can tell by the expressions on their faces that they're thinking, oh, well, she's doing this because she was a teen mom herself and, she's giving back to the community. I guess that is the traditional or normal train of thought there. That couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, I don't have any children. My connection to the work, which kind of ties into what you were talking about with forgiveness, is that I know the pain of regret. I remember over 20 years ago, I was super sick, just really, really sick for almost a whole year. And I went to the doctor, and things were to a point where I had to make a decision about having surgery. And I knew that the surgery would leave me unable to have children. I knew that. And I was at a point where it was either have the surgery in a non emergency situation or wait until I'm in a life threatening situation and have the surgery then. But at that point, the surgery was going to happen. And so I was in ministry then and, preaching everywhere and all of that. And I got to thinking, I said, I don't want to end up in a foreign country and, things go left and I need emergency surgery and I can't communicate with the medical team because of a language barrier. So I opted to have the surgery. And Elisha, let me tell you, I don't think I will ever forget the night I woke up from the surgery for as long as I live. I woke up that night in a whole lot of pain, even though I was sedated. I remember the pain. I remember feeling like an entire pallet of bricks were sitting on my stomach. I remember feeling all of that. But the most profound thing that I remember was my first thought. And that first thought was, oh my God, what have I done? I can still hear that inner voice resonating in my mind. And I just said it maybe once or twice. Oh my God, what have I done? Because here's the thing. Yeah, I was preaching everywhere. I was doing everything I knew to do. But even though I had close friends, then no one, not one single person in my life asked me, am I prepared to live with the decision that I was about to make? Nobody asked me that question. And I was a grown woman then. I didn't even think to ask myself that question because I responded to the situation in logic, not in the faith that I had been preaching about. I did what I thought was the right thing to do at the time. And I never stopped to consider if I was really prepared for the decision that I was making because there were some psychological ramifications of this. I was at what I thought was the prime of my life, the prime of my ministry, and here I was defective and I couldn't have children. And I remember hearing those words in my head, oh my God, what have I done? Because Elisha, there are some things in life that cannot be undone. And this was one of those things, and I'm sorry, oops, I didn't mean to do that. There are some things that cannot be undone. And that is my biggest regret because I did not give God a chance. I did not, say, well, let me apply the faith that I preach about and actually practice what I preach. Instead, I prayed for the surgeons, that everything would go well. I didn't pray for divine healing. And so my connection to my foundation is rectifying that inescapable regret, that feeling of condemnation. Did it go away? It took years. It took years for me. And when I say years, I'm not talking about 1, 2, or 3. I'm talking about 10, 15, closer to 20 years to really overcome the regret because it was there at every Mother's Day. I hated it because I was like being forced to relive it and to rethink about it, while everyone is excited about, this is my greatest accomplishment in life, not the degrees, not the money, not the house, not the cars. It's my children. I don't have that. But what I do have is my foundation is my baby. I stay up with it all night. I cry over it. I fight for it. I do whatever I have to do in order for it to grow into what it needs to become. And so that's my connection to the foundation, and that's why I do what I do.
That word regret is something else that kind of holds you back. And it's also tied to unforgiveness, too,
Mhm.
because it sounds like you had to take a journey of letting go of the offense in order to move forward. So, how did you take steps? What was your journey in you forgiving yourself? And if you're still walking that walk, that's okay. I just am wondering what you've done so far because it does sound like the foundation is part of your restoration story.
It is. It is because having the foundation doesn't mean that this one event didn't happen. It means kind of like the way I present myself to these young ladies is I'm not here to judge you or your past or how you got here. My only question is, what are you going to do now? How are you going to move forward? And I'm determined to keep the focus on that question because truth be told, if you lived any time past the age of 5, you probably could say, if I knew then what I know now, we would all do things differently. And so the focus now is on what are you going to do going forward? And I think that is where the real change starts. I think the turning point for me happened several years ago. Our pastor was about to preach and he read this scripture in Proverbs that talks about there were several things that are never satisfied. And one of the things listed in the book of Proverbs was the barren womb. And that scripture just hit me because I'm like, God, you really do know. You really do know how I feel. I'm not just lost on the radar because I'm not a mom. I'm not incomplete. I'm not defective. This was just not the path that you had me to be on. And then, becoming an educator years later, I'm now responsible for more children than I could ever birth. And so God has a way of restoring. He really does.
I think your story is just amazing in how you began to get on your journey of restoring, and also you forgiving yourself, because in the arena of you forgiving yourself, I bet the regret has started to release or has released.
Yes.
When did you think that happened, the release of the regret, or when it started to happen?
When it started was maybe about 2 years after my surgery. My husband and I, well, we were engaged at the time. And mind you, my husband and I, well, I won't tell you that part because it'll come up in just a moment. But I was talking to a pastor friend of mine about, my upcoming wedding and, not being able to have children. And somehow I told her, I don't know how I was going to pull this off, but I wasn't going to tell my husband that I couldn't have kids. I don't know. I just, the thought of having to say those words, to look him in the eye and tell him, oh no, I just couldn't. And I remember my pastor friend telling me in no uncertain terms, she said, Rhonda, if you start your marriage on a lie, you are destined for failure. She said, you have to tell him before you get married. He deserves to know. She said, I can't tell you how he'll respond. If he walks, it'll hurt. She said, but at least you'll know what you need to know about him, or he may be okay with it. She said, but you'll never know, and you have to do what's right. You need to tell him. And I'll never forget the day that I told him. I was crying. I mean, nasty tears, just nasty tears. And I told him, and he sat there through the whole conversation, looking at me eyeball to eyeball, never saying a word. He let me get it all out. And when I finally couldn't find any more words to say, he said, Rhonda, when I met you at the age of 2, you didn't have any children. When I first proposed to you when we were 8 years old, you didn't have any children. The first time I told you I loved you, you didn't have any children. When I proposed to you for real, you didn't have any children. He said, so me loving you was never dependent upon you having children because they were never a part of the picture. I love you for you. Girl, I snotted and cried all over again with that. I'm like, oh my goodness. And so, now we're at an age now, even if I could have children, we're older now. And now we enjoy our freedom. We like being able to go and and not have to worry about, well, did you sign this one out of school? Did you do this? No, we just, whenever we get ready to go, we just go because it's just the two of us. Just the two of us. Oh, this is not that show.
Well, you can do it, girl. I'll do it with you.
So yeah, yeah.
But
So
even in that, like, so it sounds like part of your redemption story is you got the perfect fit for you. You have your husband, and you guys are just living, most of the time anyway, your best lives. You have the foundation where you can assist and support other young mothers who are in situations where they're needing support, and you're in the education system where you're able to assist and support other children through their educational journeys. If that don't sound like a restoration story, I don't know what is right now. I mean,
yes,
you have more children than most women would even want to give birth to. So,
yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And my coaching program that goes along with the foundation is for at risk students. And I help them improve their college and career readiness.
Wow.
And so it just kind of all blends together.
Wow. So it became part of your mantra, your ministry. So
Yeah,
I'll tell you this, Rhonda, I am a mom. I'm a mom and I'm blessed to have three. Okay. It is very difficult to pour into other children in the manner that you're doing so when you are a mother. You follow what I'm saying? It's very difficult because your priority is who the Lord has given you to steward. So I think it sounds like when you woke up and you said, "Oh God, what did I do?" God is sovereign. So he already had it mapped out. I don't
absolutely.
It was already in the plan. It was never not in the plan. It was already in the plan.
Yes, yes. And I wouldn't say I wouldn't change a thing,
Mhm.
but by the same token I would because so many things have transpired and that would not have transpired if my life had turned out differently. And it when I look back and see, I was telling someone earlier today that my whole life has been like an outlier and this just kind of fits, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so there's nothing traditional about my life. In fact, my husband and I, we've known each other for over 50 years. We were
Wow.
married for 7 years, divorced for 12, but God brought us back together and we remarried in 2021.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
And what is
amazing.
Yes, and what is really so powerful is that back in 2006, we were in church. This is when we were married the first time. We were in church, and our pastor called us up to the front and he prophesied over the two of us very, very specifically. I mean, it was so specific until I wrote it down when I got home. And he said that there was something coming in our lives that would astonish us and shock us and leave us wondering what in the world was going on. He said, but God is working ahead and we're going to be okay. The only thing I knew from that prophecy is that it had to do with our marriage. The marriage
Mhm.
hadn't gone left yet, but I knew that it had something to do with our marriage. And fast forward like 2 years from that point, things just started going south. 2009, we got divorced. And I actually, in the process of, I think I was just cleaning my office, maybe 2018, 2017. And I came across the notepad where I had written that prophecy down. And I remember thinking, I really trust my pastor, but I guess we're okay. I'm okay. I'm assuming he's okay. We weren't back together then. And I said, well, I don't know if this is the end result that he was referring to, but okay. I mean, it's been a long time not knowing that God would bring us back together, and it's just been a blessing. And the older
Another
versions of us,
restoration. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
yes, yes, the older versions of us, way better. And I tell people I'm not naive to think that everybody can just go back to your ex and, as the old school song used to say, make it like it was. Because some things you can't go back to, you shouldn't go back to. But God had a plan and a path for us. And so here we are today.
Well, I'm just really, really happy for you. I am so thankful that you are sharing the story. I am someone that believes that you can't go forward if you're holding on to other things. And in essence, and what that looks like can be regret, it can be choosing to move in a place of forgiveness, it can be letting go of bitterness, remorse. You know what I mean? All those things. And it's so powerful to me that what you said was in order to go into a place of empowerment, in order to get yourself back, you have to move in that space. And that's not always an easy thing to do. And, audience, sometimes that is a moment by moment experience because sometimes with what has happened can be so horrible. I'm just calling it out like it is, can be so horrible. It's just the idea of it just puts you in another place. And you do have to go through those feelings and those emotions. You don't want to push that stuff down. And the reason you don't want to do it is because it can lead to anxiety, depression, and other things that you've heard me talk about, and probably in other podcasts you've heard those people talk about. You go onto YouTube, you'll find those people say similar things too. But we're not talking about shoving something down, your emotions down. What we're kind of referring to is processing what has happened, and within that space of processing, beginning it to let it go or letting it go so that you can get yourself back. And the way you get yourself back, it doesn't mean you're going to get the old you back, because we're constantly evolving. Thank God I am not who I was 10 years ago. So, because we are constantly evolving, we're changing, we don't stay the same. And a lot of times, if you have something that has happened to you, it changes you. But you have the power to do a trajectory of it being something that you're moving forward from the place of wholeness instead of the place of having a wound. That's kind of what I'm referring to.
I distinctly remember when my husband and I were dating again this second time around, what I found about myself, that any little thing he did, that just didn't sit well with me or rubbed me the wrong way, anything he did, my first immediate response was, mm-mm. You know what? I ain't got to take this. I was doing just fine before you slid on back up in here. I'll be all right. All this would be going through my mind. And I'm like, mm-mm, no, no, and wait for it. No. And then I distinctly remember getting to a place where I forgot what he did. That's not even the point. But I remember literally stopping and telling myself, Rhonda, if you're going to make this relationship work, you're going to have to stop letting I'm out be your first response. You
Mm-hmm.
can't, let an exit strategy be your first response to every little bitty thing if you're going to make this work. And so I told myself, if I could not have a healthy relationship with him without throwing up the past in his face, without saying anything like that, then I needed to get out of the relationship altogether, because there would be no going forward if I'm just going to keep dragging the past. And so once I had that moment, that was a turning point for me and ultimately us, because now we don't rely on the past. We are new people. We're very different now that we're older. Those 12 years changed us. It broke us in ways that we didn't know we needed to be broken. We're both very different now, and we don't allow ourselves to go back. And there have been some times, even since we've been married, I might say something, and my husband will just straighten up real fast. No, no. What you're not going to do is you're not going to go back, to yesteryear. Now, we can have this discussion today, about what we're dealing with today, but it's not fair. It's unhealthy, and so that's why going through the process, getting the support that you need is so important, because without that closure, without that healing, you can't just keep adding on wound on top of wound if you don't take the time to heal.
You really do have to take the time to heal. Yep, you really do. I want to thank you for coming on to the show. If there's one specific thing that you really want the audience to get, what is the main key point? What is a key takeaway for them that you really want them to hear?
There is life after trauma.
There
No
is
matter
life
what it is, no matter what you've been through, no matter how devastating it is. And I'm not trying to act like, there isn't trauma in people's lives, but I want people to know that there is life after trauma, abundant life. Jesus said that he came that we might have life, and that we might have it more abundantly. There's life, there is healing, there is help, there is hope after trauma. And your trauma doesn't have to define you. Your trauma can refine you, but it doesn't have to define you. Just thinking about my divorce that I went through, devastated, absolutely devastated. It was such a pivotal point in my ministry. My ministry changed, it got deeper. I became more vulnerable with people, which completely changed the trajectory of my ministry and its effectiveness. And so God can take whatever trauma we've been through and make a blessing out of it. I'll sum it up this way. There's a song that I like to sing, and I'm not going to sing, but the lyrics are, Lord, Lord, I offer my life to you.
Mhm.
Everything that I've been through, use it for your glory. Lord, I offer my days to you, lifting my praise to you as a living sacrifice. Lord, I offer you my life. And so, everything that we've been through, all of the trauma, all of the pain, and all the hurt, God can still use it for his glory if we'll just trust him with our pain.
Yes, very much so. I really liked something that you said. You were talking about your marriage and not the marriage, the dating the second time, dating 2.0. And what you realized is that if you keep bringing up the past, you're not going to be able to go forward. And that's a very good way to know, audience, if you're flowing from an unhealthy space. And if you're not ready to let go, then you need to do some more healing of some sort. I would suggest pushing the pause button and doing some more healing. The thing you don't want to get caught up in is the back and forth of I want to be with do this, I don't want to do this. I want to do this, I don't want to do this. Because all that does is cause confusion. So, in order to give yourself clarity, if you find yourself constantly going back to the past, a lot of times that's because there's still a wound that needs some healing there. Okay. Rhonda, do you have any projects coming up? How can people get in contact with you?
Well, our website is www.tsefi.org. That's the acronym for the Simmons Empowerment Foundation Incorporated. You can reach out to me there. Our office email address is info@tsefi.org. And so I would love it for people to reach out. We do have a coaching program, again, as I mentioned earlier, for at risk students. And at risk means that they're at risk for high school dropout. There are so many different variables in the education system that students get labeled with. If, for example, if a student got left behind or retained in first grade, that stays on their educational record all the way until they graduate in 12th grade. And that also puts an at risk indicator on their educational record. That's just one of several things. And teen pregnancy is an at risk indicator. And so our program is for teens ages 14 through 17. Well, actually 14 to 21, because in the state of Texas, you can still be in high school at the age of 21. And so we're trying to help as many as we can. We just had a virtual summit where I was able to speak to a bunch of teen moms and dad in Africa, in Uganda and South Sudan and Kenya. And so that was a wonderful experience. But there are needs all around us, and we just have to find the courage to do something to help.
And audience, I will have all of her information in the show notes so that you should be able to refer that. If you go onto the Elisha Space on podium.com website, you'll also see her information there. So you'll have access to her information. And then the Elisha Space podcast club, more than likely you'll be able to get more information from her. And if you want to learn more about her, you'll be able to get more information from that as well, from the club as well. So be looking out with all this information. I am truly, truly thankful that you joined us on the show. Thank you so much for coming. I have a
Thank
feeling
you.
that we've helped a lot of people within this time period with the nuggets that we've been able to share with them. And audience, I want to take a moment to thank you for joining us today. As you continue to move forward, my hope is that you experience more joy, more hope, and more peace as you go forth and experience greater healing. Thank you for joining Elisha Space.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll subscribe so we can keep the conversation going. Now go move forward in your healing journey.